Welcome back to the Operation Injured Soldiers webinar series as we unpack different realities of mental health. If you're just joining us, my name is Josh. I have the privilege of serving with Operation Injured Soldier as a therapist and a pastor, helping to talk about the realities of mental health and how that impacts life after service. And we're talking a lot in this webinar about the different ways that mental and emotional health impact the way that we function, the way that we live, the way that we relate to the people around us. That's going to be pretty specific for this topic in general, because the first conversation we had was really just unpacking invisible battles, talking about trauma and moral injury. And last time we were together, if you haven't checked out that webinar, we talked about the weight of transition and what does it mean to move from a life in military service to more of civilian realities, and how do we navigate that? What are some of the things to be aware of, to look for? Maybe reasons why you sit near an exit when you go into a restaurant. You make sure that your back is against a wall and not a window or a door. There's lots of things about transitioning from military service into civilian life or into a new stage that can be challenging. And that's not just for you, but that is also for your family and loved ones. And so if you're watching this and you have family and loved ones, that is a reality that you have to navigate as well. I'm going to pull something up here for you as we kind of walk through. It looks like I'm sharing the wrong screen. I'm going to try that one more time and see if I can get that. There we go. There, we're sharing the screen. Now I want to pull this up for you because this is a document that's available to you. If you're tracking along with this, you can go online and you can print this out. But I just wanted to walk through this with you because I want to talk about how when we are in a transition stage from moving from military life to civilian life, and we've experienced some sort of trauma, which if you track from the last time we talked, couple of sessions ago, trauma is what happens when our ability to cope is not as strong as the stress we're experiencing. So whenever you have stress that overwhelms your ability to cope in the moment, you can move into a place of trauma. Or if you've been through moral injury, that carries over not only for you, but that carries over into your relationships. And this is a big one right here that I think is important for us to note, that trauma rarely announces itself. It quietly reorganizes a household. Here's the reality that if you've been through some sort of traumatic event, there may be times where your trauma flares up and it's obvious to everyone, including you. But most of the time, a lot of the things that happen through trauma, a lot of the things that happen through these overwhelming, stressful experiences, the people around us are forced to adapt and effectively reorganize their lives around our pain. And I'm going to talk just honestly and briefly about that from a non-military context for a minute, because my mom was horrifically abused as a child growing up on a farm in Indiana. And her abuse led to trauma that then later on in life changed the way she related to the people around her. And no one in my family, my sisters, me, my brother, none of us really knew the extent of what had happened until later on into adulthood. But our entire family was impacted by it and had to shift and reorganize to effectively navigate my mom's pain. And that's the truth of what trauma does. And I want to just walk through here and just remind us that trauma doesn't stay in one body. Trauma is not just an individual experience, it becomes a relational experience. Families often feel the effects long before they understand the cause. In this session, we're going to focus on awareness without blame. And if your family feels tense, disconnected, or constantly on edge, I just want to tell you, you're not failing. Your nervous system may have just be adapted to trauma. And I want to touch on that for a minute. This is something I'm super passionate about. I'm passionate about mental health. I'm passionate about the men and women who served our country. I'm passionate about families. Here's the deal. If you've been through something hard and you don't deal with it, it's going to force your families to deal with it for you. That's reality. And I don't want to make that seem like a guilt statement. I don't want to make that seem like an attack. I don't want to put extra pressure on you watching this. I don't want to create a space of shame for you. I want to talk about reality. I want to talk about the fact that when we hurt and we don't deal with it, it really forces the people around us who love us to basically deal with it for us. It puts the responsibility on our loved ones. And more often than not, for those of us who have children, especially young children, it puts the responsibility on our kids. And I don't know about you, but I really want my kids to go to therapy for something different than what I go to therapy for. I want my kids to make different mistakes. I don't want them to repeat the mistakes I make. And I don't want them to go to a therapist to have to deal with the stuff that I put on them because I didn't deal with my own stuff. And that's what we're really going to talk about. I want to talk about how trauma at home looks different than trauma in combat. So trauma at home, certainly, if you followed along with our webinars and we understand trauma, there's hypervigilance that leads to irritability or control. So this is just a question. And I get this one a lot, especially with children in a household where one or both of their family members, their parents, have been in some sort of combat situation or they're dealing with trauma in some way. Hypervigilance is where you are overly protective of your kids. In fact, I was meeting with an individual the other day, and he grew up in a very traumatic environment. And he asked me, how can I be a better dad when my kids are jumping on the bed and all I can do is think about how they're going to fall off and break something? And I'm constantly harping on them to be safe. He's in a state of hypervigilance because he's been forced to survive highly volatile situations. His threat meter or his understanding of what could go wrong is higher than your typical individual. And so it comes out in his hypervigilance. So, because, listen, if you've got young boys and there's a bed and it can bounce, let me just tell you right now, it's a surefire bet they're going to bounce on that bed. They are. And they're probably going to fall. They might even fall and break something. And that's not the end of the world. Now, depending on your budget and your insurance, it could feel like the end of the world. But the truth is, your kids are going to get hurt. In fact, the truth is, your kids are going to get hurt, and there's not really a whole lot you can do about it. In fact, as we're speaking right now, my son is on the way home from the dentist because at recess, he was playing football with a couple of his buddies, and he had a head-on collision with another buddy, and he chipped not one, not two, not three, 7 teeth. 7. And they were all his adult teeth, by the way. Yeah, that's awesome. And you know what? My wife's a first grade teacher, and she's right at the school that he plays at. And you know what? She can't control him playing football at recess. He can't control it. And so part of it is that if you are in a state of trauma, just realize that if you've been through something hard, you want to protect yourself. You have a hyper-developed threat response. You have a God-given response to fear. We all have that. But people who have been through combat, people who have been through highly traumatic environments have a hypersensitive threat response. And so we're constantly perceiving what could be a threat, what could be dangerous. And just realizing hypervigilance is a big deal. Or you move to control and you're trying to keep your kids from doing things. You're trying to keep your spouse from doing something because if you can control it, then somehow you feel better. You know what the lie of anxiety is? The lie of anxiety is that we can worry our way or control our way to peace. Hypervigilance is about worrying about every single situation and analyzing how you can survive. And control, when we try to make people do what we want, that can be really, really dangerous. Because the truth is, we only control about 15% of the things we think we control, statistically speaking. And you know what the problem with Americans? We think we control a lot. But if any of you remember 5 years ago, there was this weird thing called COVID-19. Turns out we don't control a whole lot. And turns out we don't like it when people tell us that we don't control a whole lot. So hypervigilance and control, that's how we see a lot of stuff within our environments, especially when we are not in a combat situation. Emotional numbing and withdrawal. That's another big one. I'm just going to throw these up here for you because I do think it is helpful to look at these kind of as we go through. But emotional numbing and withdrawal. If you numb out, you use substances, and we've talked about this a little bit more, or you withdraw, you isolate, try to get away from people. Anger or shutdown. This is a big one, especially with our spouse or our kids. For those of you who are in a committed relationship, for those of you who are married or you're in a romantic relationship with a significant other, usually your spouse or your significant other is the one who bears the brunt of your unprocessed pain. Why? Because intuitively we know that they're the safest person imaginable, and we tell ourselves, well, they love us and they can take it. And usually they do up to a point. But then the next casualty is usually our parents or the people who are closest to us or our kids. I find this a lot with men, especially men who have been through painful experiences. They will act like tyrants at home and they will make the kids do everything that they want them to do. And they basically have mad dad syndrome. I don't know if you've ever heard about that, but mad dad, like just dad is always mad. Dad's always got the mad look on his face. Dad's always pointing the finger. Dad's always shouting. Dad's always, I get a lot of phone calls these days from dads who say something like this. Yesterday I hurt my kids. I didn't physically hurt them, but I scared them. If in your anger you've ever scared your kids, like, hey, that's a problem. Sleep disruption that impacts parenting or marriage. I mean, just, and we'll be, I'm going to be as raw and real as I can be here for a minute. If you are in a married relationship, you already know that sexual activity is an important part of that marriage relationship. I know a lot of couples that are not on the same sleep schedules and therefore don't have regular rhythms of intimacy and activity, and that becomes a problem. Or you're like ships passing in the night and you never have any time to communicate because your sleep is dysregulated. Also, by the way, did you know the CDC says that we need anywhere, get this, from 8 to 10 hours of sleep on average for healthy cognitive functioning? Did you know that the average American gets less than 7 hours of sleep a night? And if you've been through a traumatic event, you may suffer from what is called sleep disruption, which means you have trouble falling asleep, trouble staying asleep, trouble when you wake up, especially for those of us who get older, anybody over 40, you ever have it where you wake up at 2:00 in the morning and you just can't get back to sleep? And it's because you've got all of these things. It's like you open your eyes and your mind just starts going and you can't pray it away. You can't stop it. It can really mess with your emotional health, but it can also impact your parenting and your marriage for some of the reasons that I mentioned. And then, of course, moral injury is about a shame response, or it can produce a spiritual disconnection. And those are the way that trauma can look in life after combat or after service. But trauma is not who someone is. Trauma is just their nervous system that's learned to survive. And it does impact the people around us. I want to talk a little bit about the ripple effect that a lot of couples that I work with and a lot of families that I work with experience. Spouses and partners often experience this idea of like walking on eggshells. You know what's interesting, especially if anger or avoidance is a part of your trauma or a part of what your trauma does to you when you feel triggered, you get angry or you avoid. You know what it causes the people around you to do? Navigate your triggers. Here's the deal. You are responsible for how you behave when you're triggered. Your people in your life, they cannot be expected to know everything that sets you off and then try to avoid it. What happens from that is when people are walking around on eggshells, your family never feels safe. They're always on high alert. And those are situations where trauma actually increases the likelihood of your family living under a state of chronic stress. And as previously mentioned, if their stress exceeds their ability to cope in the moment, what does that do to them? That puts them in a state of trauma. And therefore, our unprocessed pain becomes the catalyst for actually creating traumatic experiences for the people in our life that we love. And it perpetuates this story or this cycle. It also leads to our spouse emotionally overfunctioning. Probably the best way to put this is there's a great researcher and author. His name is David Thomas. He wrote a book called Raising Emotionally Strong Boys. And he talks about something in his book called anchoring. And the best way to describe anchoring is if any of you watching have ever seen a 2-year-old, specifically a 2-year-old boy, throw a tantrum. Here's what it looks like. 2-year-old boy wants something. Mom or dad say, no, you can't have that. They can't cope with it in the moment. And so what do? They start screaming. Maybe not 2, maybe it's 3 years old. I had this when I was in Meijer once. In fact, I'll just tell you the whole story. I went to Meijer with my son once. And so if you don't know what Meijer is a brand store here in the Michigan area. They're all throughout the Midwest, but it's a big grocery store, superstore, market. So I went to Meijer with my son. He was 3 years old. And actually, it wasn't Meijer, it was Target. I remember because we had to go to the Target toy aisle. If you have a 3-year-old and your 3-year-old ever says to you, Mom, Dad, I don't want to buy a toy. I just want to look at the toy. That's a trap. That's what we call a trap because they actually do want to buy a toy, but they're trying to convince you to get there because in their mind, they think if we see it, then Mom or Dad will buy it. So we're in Target. He says, Dad, I don't want to buy a toy. I just want to look at a toy. And because I'm an idiot, I said yes. And we went to the toy aisle and guess what? He looked at the toys and guess what? He didn't just want to look at a toy. He wanted to buy a toy. He said, buy that. I don't even remember what it was, but buy that, Dad. And I said no. And then all of a sudden we moved into the weeping and the wailing and the gnashing of teeth. And he threw himself on the ground and he's screaming. And I've got this whole thing where I believe that everybody in Target can hear my son and they know because of the way that he screams that it's my son and they know who I am. And all of a sudden everybody in Target, the 500 plus people that are in Target that day, that's the story I told myself. It was probably more like 20 people, but I thought it was like 500. I'm thinking that everybody in Target, these 500 people think that Josh Sorhoff is a terrible father and an idiot because he went to go look at toys, even though he knew his son wanted to buy a toy. And here's what's really fascinating. Did you know that feeling of shame can soak into our bodies in less than 3 seconds? within 3 seconds, we can be triggered and flooded with all of these emotions. So here I am. My 3-year-old son is throwing a tantrum, and he's feeling, this is where it comes in. He's feeling icky on the inside. And his solution is to make me feel icky on the inside so that I will then do something to make him feel better. That's what toddlers do. Did you know that people who have been through traumatic experiences and don't know how to regulate for themselves can do the same thing to their spouse? In fact, I had it maybe 2 years ago. I was working with an individual who had been through intense combat experiences. We're talking multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and had seen multiple explosions, had parts of his body rebuilt. And one of the things that we worked on was when he didn't get what he wanted from his wife, he would get quiet, he would withdraw, and he would give her the silent treatment. And when she would say, "Hey, is everything okay?" He would say, "Yeah, I'm fine. Why do you ask?" And he would put it back on her, almost as if to make her feel that she was imagining this whole thing. And what it forced is it forced her to do the work of his emotional pain. And that's not fair. Now, it happens, but it's not fair. And what that can do, if you're tracking along on the worksheet here, is it can actually lead to a place where you feel your spouse feels lonely in marriage. They feel like they're having to do all the work. They don't feel seen. They don't feel understood. They feel like they're carrying the emotional weight of the family. And then if that means that they continue to feel unseen, or as we mentioned, it can actually put them in a space where they're feeling secondary trauma, which is trauma taken on from the trauma of someone else, basically forcing them to be a sponge, soaking up all of your pain. It can lead to a lot of spouses feeling like they're managers instead of partners. Feel like they're roommates raising kids. The children are also pretty deeply impacted. This is really, really fascinating. Did you know that children, even in utero, they're finding while they're still becoming full, like bodied adults before they're born, before they enter into the world? Did you know that they can pick up on the stress hormones of the mother? It can actually change the way that they process through stress. As little babies, when little babies see their mother or their father crying, they will also start crying, even though they don't know, because they just pick up on the fact that mom or dad are sad. Kids are really perceptive, and so they can sense. This is fascinating. Did you know that the human personality is 80% formed by the time we are 6 years old? 80%. That means we figure out who we are, how we fit into the world, how we relate to other people, 80% formed before we even learn how to read words. But we learn how to read people from the moment we open our eyes. And so it's just really important to know that children are in fact affected. And I'm going to pull this up again here. A couple of things that we see in children who are working through trauma in the home. They show high signs of anxiety. High signs of hyper responsibility, where because they're walking on eggshells, they feel like they have to take responsibility for themselves. Maybe if they're older and they have to take care of responsibility for the younger kids to make sure the younger kids understand what they need to do or what they don't need to do so they don't make mom or dad mad or they don't cause stress in the home. There's an emotional shutdown where they withdraw or they get overly aggressive. They have developmental regression. And so it effectively can short circuit their neurodevelopment. Or worse, it makes them believe that they're the ones who cause the stress, that if you don't address it, that this is their fault. And then, of course, then they turn into kind of this stage of life where they start thinking that everything's their fault. A common thing that you're going to find with younger individuals, children who grow up in environments where there's unprocessed pain or trauma, is that they apologize for everything, even when it's not their fault. They're just constantly saying, I'm sorry, because they're trying to take responsibility for pain that isn't theirs. And then they're apologizing for the stress that comes with it. And this is the big one here. Children adapt to what they cannot control. And growing up in a household where someone is working through unprocessed trauma, that puts a kid in a space of unknown. And so they are forced to adapt. And so it changes their behavior, changes their thought pattern, changes their personality, changes the way that they respond to events around them. And there's a couple of things that are important as you kind of navigate that. One I want to talk about here is just how to reframe the situation and how I reframe a situation with spouses and with kids. One, to move from what's wrong with them or why can't they just move on? I don't know. And, maybe this would be a good space for just a little engagement. And I know, Kyle, you're listening in, and Jules, I'd love to hear if you've got any thoughts on this as well. But did you ever have, coming out of combat situations, Kyle, or moving into civilian life, did you ever have someone say, why can't you just move on? Why can't you just forget about it?
Well, I don't know if I ever got that specific question, but I know there's questions that have come up about, why can't you just kind of get back into the normal world?
Yeah.
Or why aren't you used to being out? Because like myself, you get that hyper vigilance kicks in, and then you're, dodging potholes in the road or dodging boxes on the road that are blowing across the road. So stuff like that even, 6 months after you return, it's still the same, instinctive, maneuver that you would have had when you're over in combat.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. I had that, maybe 5-6 years ago. I was working with a couple, premarital counseling session, and he served 2 tours in Afghanistan, and he was Army Special Forces dude, he's a good dude. And his fiance, she came in and she was hot under the collar, because she had arranged for them to have this really beautiful dinner overlooking the water right by a window. And he refused to sit at the table because he didn't want to sit in a space where he was so exposed. Mm-hmm. And she had this kind of thing of like, what's wrong with you? Like, I want to be able to go and have nice dinners at nice places with white tablecloths and nice views. And part of that was just this attitude of like, hey, what's wrong with you? Like, why can't we just get past this? And it's hard to understand that there's an overly sensitive threat response. What about you, Jules?
Well, I've not been to combat, but we deal with people that come into our world with that. And I think of one friend that we deal with who, he won't even let the shades be up in his house.
Yeah.
That type of thing. Yeah. He's there's just that And so in listening to you, I'm hearing how I'm understanding now why that's there.
Yeah.
Or being raised in a home where there was trauma and not dealing with that. Not dealing with the past, not just not taking hold of what went on and correcting it, and then having it come out in anger towards children, people, and never dealing with it. And so you are in your later years, and it's coming out again, even as your children are trying to help you.
Yep. Yeah, and it's interesting too that you bring that up. Of like, it doesn't have to be just combat. I've worked with individuals who grew up in abusive homes, and they are hyper vigilant when their kids go over to play at somebody else's house, more so than I would be. And that's not right or wrong. That's just reality. And what I've found is, especially working with families, that shifting from this mindset of what's wrong with them, why can't they just move on, to asking the question, hey, what happened to them? And what does our family need to feel safe again? So one of the things that I work on, one with individuals who've been through combat traumatic experiences, is to address what happened. That can be really hard because, as if you've listened to our previous webinars, trauma disintegrates. So trauma actually fragments our memory. So it's hard to remember clearly what actually happened. As you dive in, you start to remember more. But then you need to ask the question, hey, what does our family need to feel safe again? What do you need to feel safe? So with this couple, just that I was working with, again, premarital, they're still married. They're married now. They're still married. It's great. But one of the things that they needed to do is she needed to be able to ask, hey, what makes you feel safe when we go to a restaurant? What makes you feel safe when we're in a group of people? And with our kids, what needs to occur for you to feel safe? Do we need to map our route to see how few potholes there are, Kyle? Do we need to make sure that we don't drive through Chicago? Do we need to take back roads instead of the highway? What do we need to do to help remind you that this is not that? Where we are now is more secure. We're safe today. We're safe in this moment. Those are really important. And this is the thing to note here, and I cannot overstate this. Healing begins with restoring safety and a feeling of safety. It doesn't begin when we fix behavior. Listen, you can go to the restaurant and you can try to fake it till you make it and sit in an open environment, but your whole nervous system is going to be dysregulated and you're going to be living under that hyper threat response. That's a reality. Your body and your brain have adjusted to that. So you're not going to heal if you are emotionally dysregulated. What's going to help you heal is if you feel safe. In fact, and I shared this in our last webinar, but I had the privilege of sitting at a table with a young man who is now married, got kids, went through multiple tours, and he looked at me and he said, 5 years ago, I would never have been able to come to a Christmas party like this. And he was actually, believe it or not, he was sitting with his back turned to other people in the middle. He was engaging at the table. And he said, it's because my wife helped me understand that I can be safe in places like this. Man, that's a journey. I could tell that he'd been through therapy. I could tell that he'd done the work and he was way further ahead, but it's because someone was patient with him as he went through his journey. So I want to talk about practical tools, especially for those of you who are caregivers, who are spouses. I want to talk about practical tools that you can employ that help to create safety at home. One, predictable routines. Family on a schedule, not overly structured, but predictable routines. trying to say we wake up at this time, we brush our teeth at this time, we go to bed at this time. We do these things on a regular, consistent basis so that it provides a sense of structure. And I don't have to tell you this because you already know this, but the military is nothing if not structured. Structure, 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 structure. That's one of the hardest parts of transition. So if there's a way that you can provide predictable routines, as little surprises as possible, that's really important, especially if you have younger children. Putting them on a schedule, first of all, that's just good for your sanity. Just that's reality. But it's also good for that. Having clear expectations. What's expected, what's not expected. Calm transitions. Big things like waking up a half an hour earlier to make sure that you've got all of the things done for the morning, especially if you have kids that need to go to school. There is nothing more stressful than trying to get your kids out the door in the morning. It's awful. But if you can wake up a half an hour earlier and you can make coffee and you can get the lunches done and you can fold the laundry and you can lay the clothes out, you can have all of that stuff taken care of before the kids wake up, then there's less stress once the day starts. Because the minute they open their eyes, it's on. Emotionally naming without judgment. This is a big one. If you are a spouse and you can see that your loved one who has been through combat or has transitioned into civilian life, you can see that they're agitated. You can say, "Hey, can I just say it looks like you're pretty agitated right now. Looks like you're pretty stressed out. Is everything all right? What do you need? What do you need to feel safe? Do we need to get out of here? Like, I just want you to know that your feelings, how you're feeling right now, matters more to me than whatever it is we're doing." I've mentioned this on some of the webinars before. I'm just going to mention it again. I love going to Costco for 30 minutes. That's it. That's my window of tolerance. I see you nodding and I feel like you're right there with me. For 30 minutes, I'm good. You know why? Because for 30 minutes, I can walk down the aisles that I like to walk through. And I like to look at the stuff that I like to look to. And then right around the time that I get to, in the Costco in Granville is set up in this way, right around the time I get to like the liquor cabinet area or the liquor shelves, I start to lose my window of tolerance. And then all of a sudden it's overwhelming. Then it's the food aisle and there's people moving around and they're getting in my way. And it just really stresses me out. Early on in our marriage, I would get really irritated. My wife would get really judgmental and really frustrated with me. And she'd say I was not fun to be with shopping. And I was like, cool, then go by yourself. Don't say that to your wife, by the way. They don't like it when you say that. But that's what I was feeling in the moment. And once we were able to start working through the reality that I was emotionally overwhelmed, she started shifting to, hey, what do you need? Do you need to go wait in the car? Do we need to go? Do we need to just leave stuff here? And I would just look at her sometimes and say, you know what, I'll go wait in the car. Or no, hey, I'm going to do some deep breathing exercise. I'm going to do some mindfulness. I'm going to do some stuff to work on me. Like, give me the grace and the space to power through this. See, that's when I can feel safe. That's when I can heal. Maybe having some some healthy, helpful family phrases, something like, hey, we're safe right now. Something that actually my therapist taught me that has been incredibly helpful for me is these words. We are not where we were. Where we are now is more secure. I am seen. I am safe. I am secure. That's what I tell myself. Hey, we're not where we were. Where we are now is more secure. I'm seen, I'm safe, I'm secure. Having some sort of phrase that you can employ, that you can depend on. Here's the interesting thing about trauma triggers. They are predictable. And if we can predict it, we can plan for it. So having a family plan that's structured, having a family plan that has phrases, that can really help. Supporting veterans without carrying their trauma, supporting your loved ones without doing the work for them, super important. You can encourage without pressuring. You can make suggestions. Little thing here, if people have been through trauma, guess what? They don't like being told what to do. Partly because, and you probably know this, especially if you served in the military, you get told what to do a lot. You're under orders. When you get out, you're like, I'm a free agent. I make the calls. I get to do what I want. You know what we don't like? People telling us what to do when we don't want to be told what to do. So making suggestions without putting pressure. Try to stay away from ultimatums. And first of all, if you're going to make an ultimatum, make sure that you make good on it. Otherwise, it's manipulation. Just flat out. Hold boundaries with compassion. Name the impact without accusing. So a situation like this, where maybe someone who's triggered because of a trauma experience bursts out in anger and hurts the kids. Naming the impact without accusation is, hey, our kids were really hurt by that thing that you said. That's naming the impact without accusation. That's just stating what happened. Accusation would like, why are you such an ass? Okay. Like, words matter. The way that we walk through it matters. Couple ways to support kids as they're going through it. Explain trauma in age-appropriate ways. So this goes without saying, but there are some things that kids shouldn't hear at a certain age. Just, they shouldn't. So really shouldn't talk about violent experiences until kids are about 14. Here, I'll tell you why. Here, this is an interesting tidbit. And for those of you who are parents, take note of this. When a child moves into 5th grade, right around 10 years old, 10 and 11, do you know the number one fear of children in that age bracket? That their parents are going to die or leave. So you know what you shouldn't probably talk about? Death. Don't talk about death. Wait till they're 14. And you can talk about other things, that mommy and daddy saw scary things, or daddy saw scary things. Daddy experienced a lot of situations where a lot of people were hurt around him. There's a lot of ways that you can navigate that, but explain trauma in age-appropriate ways. Reassure children that it is not their fault. Hey, it's not your fault that dad's mad. Just dad gets scared sometimes. Dad gets anxious sometimes. Mom gets scared sometimes. It's not your fault. We're working on that together. Protect their right to be kids. Here is what children do. They adapt. If you don't explain it, if you don't have a way of helping them through it, they will adapt. And what they'll typically do is take on more responsibility than they're supposed to. So it's similar to, and it works this way with parents who have addiction issues, especially in the home. What I see often, and saw a lot when I did pediatric work, so I would see kids that would wake up earlier to make breakfast, especially the older ones, make breakfast for all the other kids and get everybody ready for the day and get them out the door so that mom and dad could sleep the hangover off. Because if mom and dad woke up and they were hungover, they were angry. And you know what that does? That short circuits their right to be a kid. Because I know this is going to sound crazy, but you know what I believe? I believe that children have the right to wake up when their parents are like, hey, it's time to get out of bed and time to go to school. Like, it's cool if kids wake up for themselves with an alarm clock, but I actually don't think they should. I think they should be kids, and they should progressively learn discipline from their parents, but not be forced to do the work for their family. So protect their right to be kids and model emotional regulation. Man, this is a big one. My friends, I can't overstate this. I'm going to swear. I don't always swear on webinars, but I'm going to swear a little bit. So if you don't like swearing, you can do one of these. You can do earmuffs. Okay. Work your shit out before you take it out on your kids or your loved ones. Work it out. If you don't know how to cope with trauma, your trauma triggers, your pain, you got to figure that out. Go to a therapist, go to a support group, because your ability to handle your pain is directly proportional to your kids' ability to handle theirs. And if you can't work it out for you, you're going to pass it on to them. You're going to take it out on them. And you don't want that. There's lots of fun grounding practices. You can do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding. If you're interested in learning how some of these practices work, you're welcome to reach out to me. But that's a great grounding practice. Taking family walks, family movement time, shared breathing at bedtime, breathing together, taking tech-free connection times. So going on a digital detox or making sure that you don't have technology around you when you're trying to connect as a family. Having a family prayer or a stillness moment is really helping. Just remember, regulation is contagious. Calm spreads. Anxiety is also infectious. And so you have to choose, are you going to be a non-anxious presence in the room, or are you going to be a perpetuator of anxiety? A couple of important next steps here. One, counseling is strength, not failure. You got to reach out. And that's a sign of strength. Admitting that you need help is a sign of strength. Family therapy is about alignment. Trauma-informed therapy or veteran-aware kind of care matters. Consider both individual and family support. Family counseling is great. And I'm sure you can find some in your area. If you're looking for options, you feel free to reach out to me. I can help do some research for you. Peer connection for spouses is really important. Really important. So finding other military spouses who are working through this gives them a sense of connection, gives them a sense of feeling like they're not alone. Trauma can shape a family, but it doesn't have to define it. Listen, nervous systems can heal. Children can be more resilient when they're supported. Families can grow stronger. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It just means that the past no longer controls the present. Like you're never going to forget what happened to you. You're never going to forget. But you can learn from it. You can grow from it. And you can say, well, this is not that. And I don't have to let that affect what's happening now. I just want to go through a case study here with you because I feel like maybe this can give a little context to it. And again, these are case studies that are made up. The situations are real. But if you're listening to this and this rings true for you and all the buckets, I just made these up. So I pulled these out of my own brain here. We've got a veteran. His name is Mike. He's 38. He's an Army vet, had 2 deployments. And let's say based on the age, there are 2 deployments in Afghanistan. Okay. And his spouse is Emily. Children are Jackson and Lily. Jackson is 8, Lily's 5. Since returning home, Mike is consistently on edge. Loud noises, clutter, and schedule changes trigger irritability. Emily has learned to anticipate his moods, keeping the house quiet, managing the kids closely, and absorbing tension to keep peace. The children sense the pressure. Jackson has become hyper-compliant and anxious, while Lily has frequent emotional outbursts. Emily feels exhausted and alone. Mike feels ashamed, but doesn't know how to change. Here's what's really happening. If you're tracking with us, Mike's nervous system is stuck in hypervigilance. Kyle, it's a little bit of what you were talking about. I'm there. Emily has become the emotional regulator, so she has to do the work for the family and for Mike. And the children are adapting to an unpredictable emotional climate. The home has become a place of management and instead of a place of safety. And here's some work that I would do, practices and solutions that I would work through with a family who is stuck in something like this. One, I would reframe the problem. Jules, this is a little bit of some of the stuff you were talking about there. Shift from Mike is angry to Mike's nervous system is overwhelmed. Hey, Dad's not angry. Dad is overwhelmed. reframe the problem, because the behavior is communicating something deeper. Remove the moral judgment and increase compassion. Just, you know what? Here, I'm not here to judge you. I just want to say, hey, you're really hurting and you're trying hard. And we're going to get to the bottom of this. Create predictability. So set some simple, consistent family routines that everybody can depend on. We're going to reduce surprise transition for Mike and the kids. Because remember, the kids have adapted too. So we need to try to work our way back. Name safety allowed. So family phrase, we're safe right now. We're safe right now. Practice this saying during tense moments. Even when you don't feel safe, say, hey, we're safe right now. Talk about it. Normalize it. Support without carrying. Emily begins to name the impact without absorbing it or taking it on. Mike is encouraged toward support without pressure. Okay, I think it'd be a really good idea for you to go to a support group. I can't make you. I can't force you. But you got to work on this, because if you don't work on this, you're going to start taking it out on your family. Yep. And then we're going to protect the children. We're going to give them an age appropriate explanation. We're going to say, hey, dad's brain learned to protect him, and it sometimes overreacts. Boy, man, if you don't take anything else from this webinar, the language we use in helping our kids understand what's going on is so important, because if we don't know what's going on, we will fill in the gap with what we think, and what we think is typically a conspiracy. And we do not need our children to be conspiracy theorists. We got enough of those in the world. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
And then we want to tell the kids, hey, this is not your fault. This is not your fault. It's going to be all right. We're going to work on this, but this is not your fault. Those are just some of the aspects of what it means to understand the ripple effect that trauma has in the home. And again, some of this comes specifically from military service scenarios, but the truth is, it doesn't have to be related just to military service. The trauma can impact this. And I see this a lot with the families that I work with that go through trauma. We've got a couple minutes left. Love to be able to answer some questions if anybody has anyone.
So for reference, Josh, and just an example, maybe you can help make it understandable for the veterans that might be struggling with something similar to this. What's a good way to communicate with your spouse or your kids that you need that space to kind of decompress and kind of get back to a state of normalcy in the moment?
Yeah, in the moment, it's really like here would be the ideal situation. Okay. Here, I'm going to give you the ideal, and then I'm going to give you the realistic. Okay. Here's the ideal situation. You're triggered and you say, hey, I'm feeling in my body that my nervous system is overwhelmed and I'm really triggered by this experience. And it would be really helpful if I could go someplace to do some deep breathing and I could take some time to relax. That would be the ideal scenario. Here's the realistic one. Have a code word that means all of that. Like banana smoothie. Because nobody likes banana smoothies. And if you do, pick something else like pickle smoothie. But you have a code word that represents, I'm not okay right now. I'm not sure what's going on. And the code word is not just for the veteran, but it's also for the kids or the spouse, because sometimes the kids or the spouse will see it faster than you will. And they'll look at you and say, hey, pickle smoothie? And be like, yeah, no, I'm okay. And they're like, no, pickle smoothie. Pickle smoothie. You're not okay. So having a code word, I do that work a lot especially in marital work and in family work, just making sure that we have a known code word or phrase that means, boy, mom or dad need a break. Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Just, I know that in the moment you don't always have time to react in the way you want to. And that's something that I've never thought about. As far as like being prepared at that, when that happens.
Yeah.
Prepare for everything else in life almost. And as a veteran, you've prepared for the ultimate. So even something as simple as preparing for a reaction to something bad when you're back, if you're not in that environment, it's a fantastic tool that I think anybody can deploy, whether you're a veteran or not. But it makes a lot of sense for the veterans that do struggle with that, especially with things that trigger you violently.
Totally.
I know there are plenty of those in the life after service, that there's certain things that are more of a violent trigger than just an anxious trigger.
Yep.
That almost that code word could help you bring you down, I would think, faster, because you recognize it faster.
Well, and I've had a lot of success. So the code word is only helpful. You need a phrase or a code word. You need a place to go to. You need a practice to engage in. And then you need some sort of prayer and or shared perspective to return to. So here's what that looks like. And if the code is pickle smoothie, and you're at Costco, let's just use Costco because I used that earlier. Pickle smoothie means I need to get out of here. I need to go to the car. Perfect. We have a place. And it also means I got to have a practice, which, I'm going to listen to music. I'm going to do some deep breathing. I'm going to do some reading. I'm going to have then a prayer, which is, again, we're not where we were. Where we are now is more secure. I'm seen, I'm safe, I'm secure, or we are safe right now. And then we need shared perspective, which is coming back together after we've calmed down and saying, okay, what happened? What was the trigger? Help us understand. We're safe now. The threat is gone. We're going to be okay. It brings everybody back, the family back, to a shared kind of space. So again, phrase, place, practice, prayer, perspective. 5 P's of success there. And those are things that I do work on with individuals in pretty much every situation when there's overwhelming stress or triggers. Yep.
I'm going to coin that, Josh, with you. The 5 P's.
5 P's. Yeah. Pickle smoothie. Just made it up right here. Loving it. Yep. I've never used pickle smoothie before, but now I'm going to use it all the time.
Yes.
I'm going to thank my friends at OIS for that one. So there you go. There's a little bit on family stuff. As always, listen, if you're listening to this, you got questions, reach out to OIS. They can get you my information. I'd be happy to help facilitate conversation, answer questions that you have. We are all in this together. And I really mean that. Don't try to go through this alone. It's already hard enough. And so we're here to support you and really thankful for you. That's all we have for you now. We'll talk with you next time.